All right, I'm going to tell a really simple story of economic growth, partly because it's coming up in relation to the idea of GDP as C plus I plus G, and partly because it's a question that I like to ask on exams, so it's probably a good idea for you to have it in the back of your head. Now, before I erase this definition, let me just really quickly comment on G. Government spending goes to, well, all kinds of things. And some of them are great, some of them are pretty bad. But we can take a lot of them and categorize them as either consumption or investment. So something like when the city puts on a fireworks show because, well, a city can get much better fireworks than I can get on my own. So if me and my neighbors like fireworks, we might be better off to give our money to the local government and have them buy that consumption good for us. Right? So some government spending is along those lines. Charity we might think of as along those lines. Other things we would think of as investment. Building roads would certainly be an investment. And an investment is fundamentally a thing that makes us more productive in the future. So let's get rid of this mathy looking stuff and just think about a PPF. We have the ability to produce more consumption stuff or more investment stuff, but we're already using what we've got, right? So then the question we might ask is, do I start a business and build a factory and directly get more investment? Or do I put my money in the bank and privately make a decision for more resources to go towards investment? Or do I vote for a candidate who's going to talk about building roads or filling potholes or investing in schools or any number of other things that we might count as an investment? So we've got private investment, we've got public investment. There's a lot of ways to think about this. We're simplifying all that down and just imagining we've got some society that's going to decide, do we make more or do we make less? And the society we're going to go with is the Duchy of Grand Fenwick, which is a small imaginary country from one of my favorite Peter Sellers movies, The Mouse That Roared. And they have two goods that they produce, wine and wool. So what would it be? It would be the Duchess of Grand Fenwick is the local nobility, and she's basically in charge. So we're going to have some ability to produce wine, some ability to produce wool, and we could produce a small amount of both. We could make a lot of wine, we could make a lot of wool, or we could go somewhere in between. And since this is the duchy and the Duchess is in charge, she has some ability to move us along our PPF to set the decision from the top down. So if we've got whatever. We've got some particular point, and then we decide, you know what, we're in stasis here and we would like to be able to produce more. The question is, how are you able to produce more? Well, you're going to have to find something to invest in. Something that maybe makes you more productive in producing wine, or something that makes you more productive in producing wool, right? Or both, or producing some new thing that didn't exist before. Now, the way we'll set this up is we'll think about, let's say, wine and wine research. So the Duchess is going to look at this scenario and ask, how much of our vineyards are we going to dedicate to training new enologists to help us to produce better wine? Better trained vintners should help us in the long run. It's going to mean we have less wine to sell in the short run, but we're going to get more out of it. So let's say they put nothing into wine research and all of their efforts into wine. Well, next year their PPF is going to end up in the same spot, right? They're not going to get better. Hopefully they don't get worse. So next year, same PPF. So we'll call this, let's say, P0. And then P1 is for after 1 year, and after 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, no change. If we are down here, our PPF doesn't grow. But what if we take some of our resources and divert them to wine research? Maybe we take our least productive rows, the rows that produce the least amount of grapes, and we say we're going to give those to the scientists. They can try and figure out what they can from them. And even though they're not going to get the best production, they might learn about how to get more productivity on less land. They might learn how to better fertilize the soil or whatever, right? Any number of things that I don't know about because I've specialized my labor not in horticulture. Although I wish I had, because my garden kind of sucks. But that's neither here nor there. If we move up here, what we're doing is we're moving away from consumption goods and more towards investment goods. And when we do that, the result is after a year, we're going to be able to produce more of both of these things. If we're going to be able to get more out of our existing vines, fundamentally what's going on is over time we're going to shift our PPF out. Now, what if we went further along and invested a lot? Well, then we're going to shift our PPF even further out than that. Now, we might get some diminishing marginal returns. We're not necessarily going to double productivity just because we put a lot of resources in wine research, but we're going to grow faster than we would on the red path, at least on the margin, right? As we move this way, our PPFs are going to expand faster. Now, here's the question that I like to ask is, where do we get more consumption? Well, in the short run, we get the most consumption by going down here to the black path where there's no growth at all. On the red path, we give up consumption, but after 2 years, we're consuming more than we would if we had just consumed 100%. So here, you get a lot of consumption in the short run, but a little bit of investment gets you even more consumption in the long run. A lot of investment might mean that even after some growth, we're getting less consumption. But in the very long run, for sure, it should mean even more consumption. So the idea here is moving further up towards investment means giving something up in the short run. You have less wine to sell, which means less income for the Duchy of Grand Fenwick, less Pinot Grand Fenwick to sell, but in the long run, you end up with more. All right.